Oh, welcome to the Secure Remote Workforce Summit, the Teams Voice session. And this is all about how, what's an easier option to enable your remote workers. Thanks for joining. All right. Your presenters today are Chris Macaluso and myself, Joe Williams III. We're senior voice consultants with Catapult Systems here, and we're here to help you kind of guide you through understanding the complexity of Teams Voice and some of the newer features that have been announced. So as a side note, if you have any questions during the session, please feel free to send them over via the chat in the Teams live event here. We will, however, be collecting and saving those questions for our Ask the Experts Q&A session. That'll be directly after this session. I think there's about a 10-minute break, but then we'll be going into that Ask the Experts session where we'll be answering those questions for you. So you can either pose them in this format or wait until that session if you need be. All right, so this is kind of what our agenda is today. We're going to focus on obviously a number of topics around kind of Teams Voice and how it can help in transforming your voice operations in your business. One, the Skype for Business online retirement. We'll take an overview, kind of look at Teams calling, the different types of Pstn connectivity that are available for Teams. We'll look at some of the Teams voice extensibility for some of the more advanced scenarios or features that you might require. And then some Teams endpoint offerings. And then lastly, some additional features that were just announced at Ignite 2020. Okay. Yeah, so, we get a lot of questions about, obviously Skype for Business Online is going away. They put that date out there. So let's talk about that for a minute. So just to clarify, right, before we get into the team stuff, as of July 31st, 2021, Skype for Business Online retirement happens, and that will no longer be accessible. So any new customers or new tenants that are coming on board with Microsoft will go directly to Teams for chat, meetings, and telephony functionality. So but if you're already running Teams or you're utilizing Skype for Business server, right, these don't, this change won't affect you. So however, organizations that are on the Skype for Business Online or you're hybridized with it, this will represent a significant change to your voice deployments and operations. Additionally, the Cloud Connector Edition will also retire on that date due to the fact that it's connecting to the Skype Online service as well. Obviously, so once your organization has transitioned from Skype Online to Teams only, you can still utilize that same type of on-premise connectivity via the direct routing with Teams, and we'll get into that a little bit here. So if your organization is using Skype Online, right, as part of this voice and routing configurations, right, ensure that you're planning for these changes that are coming in advance of the retirement of the service. So some steps to preparing for that retirement would include, evaluating the features and functionality for specific organizational needs. Speak with your department to assess how they work and how Teams might integrate with their workflows, kind of the use case idea. Decide when you want to make these migrations based upon your organizational readiness and in what manner. Right, so focus on keeping your teams operating optimally through some well-designed training and communications. That's kind of essential for driving adoption and helping that smooth transition. Right, so engage a partner also, such as Catapult or others that offers strategic planning and assessment to assist in Teams evaluation and migration efforts. All right, so we'll the next segment here we're going to cover is just kind of an overview of Teams calling and what it looks like in the application. So, what makes up calling in Teams, right? Well, it can be PSTN calls, obviously that's, or it can be the voice over IP calls, the peer-to-peer, and we'll focus more on the PSTN connectivity during this session, really. But the two different types of PSTN connectivity that are available, right? You've got the calling plans and direct routing. With the calling plans obviously being the purely cloud-based subscription model, and direct routing is you kind of bring your own PSTN, right, on-premise based telephony model, or more of this kind of this hybrid, if you will. And that utilizes obviously existing or new hardware or maybe even hosted hardware in some cases. And we'll go through these both in more detail later. So, a benefit derived from switching over to the Microsoft Teams voice over IP calling, right, specifically, is being able to make a Teams to Teams call with maybe a different branch or a federated partner, for instance, and that's some cost savings there and can help eliminate that significant PSTN cost when you're communicating. And really, that should be taken into account when you're doing your cost modeling. So, like Skype for Business Online, the Teams mobile app takes your work number with you, so you're available anywhere you choose to be working from, and is also, it's a greatly improved experience over the Skype for Business mobile app if you're used to using that one. Now, so this is kind of just an overview of what the call application in the Teams UI would appear to a remote worker, right, if they're using the Teams as a soft phone on their desktop client. So you can see things here like the dial pad where the phone number is displayed. You've got your contacts, your history, your voicemail. There's some speed dial options, and it's all kind of this multi-layered approach to the information layout currently. You can do things like managing your call forward and your team delegation, right? And I think Chris is going to jump in here to kind of fill us in on that new calling experience announced and some other features.
Right. So thanks, Joe. The previous slide showed what the calling interface as it is now in Teams, but at Ignite, Microsoft announced the new Teams calling experience that should be coming out soon through most tenants. So some of the features included in the new view, you've got obviously the dial by name or number options. They've also included the parked call view over on the left-hand side there. You've got a nice new feature is your full call history in one view. So in that center pane, you can see all your calls, your incoming and outgoing calls, as well as your voicemail, all in one easy to read pane. The quick access pane, or at the bottom, there's the quick access to your audio devices. So rather than having your users fumble around in their user options in the Teams main options window, there's quick access to the audio device settings there as well. And then over on the right pane, right now they're showing it as a speed dial pane where you can add your various speed dial contacts, but that's going to be customizable as well. So you might be able to add additional features or functions in there, such as maybe your parked calls, or maybe attendant receptionist type roles who have specific transfer options configured. That stuff will be able to be configurable and kind of be dynamic per user requirements. So one of the first questions I typically get from most of our clients when they're start out the discussion with us as far as moving their voice over to Teams, especially a lot now with the COVID and the working remote. Obviously we have users who are on a centralized in-house PBX system, and now they're all working remote, and the solution is basically, well, let's forward all their calls to their cell phones. But going with more of the Teams centralized approach, moving voice load to Teams, a lot of our clients are looking at that now as the option to instead of having to forward calls. So one of the things they're looking at is, is you hear all these rumors, you read things online. So is Teams calling, does it offer the same features as a traditional PBX and PSTN solution? So the simple answer is yes. But when you look at this chart, you can see, the common PBX features utilized by most businesses and most of their knowledge workers. But then on the other side, we see how Teams handles those same processes and how it kind of all lines up. Some of the features in the Team space will use a different terminology or maybe even a different method to achieve the same desired features, but those features are still there. So for example, on PBX, traditionally you would have an extend call option. In the Team space, that's the call transfer to cell. Hold is still hold. Your history is your call history. Things like intercom functions on the PBX side, or you can now achieve that through using Teams calling and chat instead. So, since you're transitioning from a traditional physical handset-based PBX to a soft phone solution, there's going to be some of those changes in functionality and how to achieve these same functions. So we typically will always recommend some form of user adoption or change management in your deployment project. Something to consider as you go through that transitional phase to keep the process as smooth as possible for your end users. So we're going to go back now and start talking about actual options for PSTN connectivity. Obviously, Teams can be a valid PBX system, but now how do you get your PSTN connections from the public telephone network into the Teams environment? So Joe's going to start that discussion, and we'll walk you through some of those scenarios.
All right, thanks, Chris. Yeah, so as you're considering, right, migrating from either legacy or on-premise PBX systems, or you're simply switching over from Skype for Business or Skype for Business Online, right? Some of the benefits that can be realized by moving to this the Microsoft phone system and cloud-based calling, right, can be you're bringing your business calling infrastructure under one umbrella, right? So simplifying cost models, your onboarding operations, things like this. But specifically with onboarding operations, there some things like provisioning phone numbers with with your voice users, right? That can easily be included in kind of this provisioning process when you're standing up users, right? So again, as Chris commented, all the traditional kind of commonly used features of on-prem PBX are available in Teams, right? The user DIDs, the call forwarding, call parks, call trees, auto attendance, call queues, things of that sort. So it can really be, Teams can really be enhanced or extended as well using some of these third-party applications, call centers, auto attendance. There's bots apps. Obviously, we won't get into that particular section of things, but for Teams, if you need to deliver kind of some of this advanced functionality. And also, obviously, options are available worldwide, right, to leverage Microsoft phone system if you're looking at global organizations. And so how do you break down what calling for the cloud looks like in Office 365? Well, this basically Microsoft has augmented, right, the modern workplace collaboration and productivity solution, right, with an improved experience for PSTN dial tone in Microsoft Teams in one of two ways. The calling plans, right, and these are your Microsoft phone provided service, right? That's that fully cloud-based PSTN service. The calling plans are available in both domestic and international use, right? Some of those common standard plans are from I think 120 to 240 minutes, right? Communications credits is another kind of license bucket, right? That's available to make sure you have minutes available when needed. As overflow, for instance, if somebody runs out of minutes on their calling plans. This is especially useful for executives, making sure that they're always getting their calls through or out, if you will. These credits are also useful for inbound toll-free calling and outbound meeting dialing. Now, I specify outbound meeting dialing because this is different from the inbound PSTN dialing to a call meeting. Because the inbound is covered under the audio conferencing SKU. So just a note, we always get some confusion around that particular piece. And secondly, with direct routing, you could keep your existing kind of on-premise PSTN connection, right, and or integrate with third-party PBX platforms such as Cisco's, Avaya's, your ShoreTels, etc. So we'll have some more details on that in the next few slides. With direct routing, you must utilize a Microsoft Teams certified SBC device. Audio Codes, Ribbon, and Oracle were the big three for a while. Cisco and Nokia are now added to that list, and I think there's some others in the roadmap for that too. So, in some instances, it just kind of depends. You have to, look at this from an ROI perspective or ROI calculation perspective, right? In some instances, this can be less expensive than calling plans, or where you might have existing contracts, that you need to continue to leverage or realize the to the end of that contract, if you will. So in this architecture, right, you're creating kind of your a SIP trunk connectivity from this Teams gateway device or these SBCs from your own environment. So additionally, Microsoft Teams Voice, right, has an added benefit where you can mix and match this PSTN connectivity, So you don't have to go all one or all the other. Basically meaning that you can have some users with calling plans, right, for instance, and others utilizing direct routing together in the same tenant, right? So this can be particularly beneficial for global organizations where, in certain regions, the Microsoft PSTN connectivity options are kind of limited. So, with either of these PSTN delivery options, right, the result is a fully functional business calling experience with Microsoft Teams, and again, is globally available. And Chris, I'll give it back to you for the calling plans.
Sure, thanks, Joe. Yep, so I'm going to talk a little more in detail on these different options that Joe just mentioned, the calling plans and the direct routing. So obviously the first thing is Microsoft as your PSTN provider. So this is where the Microsoft calling plans come into play. They're currently available in the US and Puerto Rico, as well as Canada. And then at Ignite, Microsoft announced 6 new countries over in Europe. So that brings us up to about a dozen major European countries as of October 1st. So I've done some deployments for clients in the UK and the Netherlands over there. But now they're also bringing on Austria, Denmark, Italy, Portugal, Sweden, Switzerland, as well as France and Spain that have already been online there. And there's a few other countries out there as well that they have it in. One of the areas we see a little bit lacking at this point right now is the APAC region, so over in Asia. And then Microsoft also announced at Ignite that after the first of the year, hopefully in January, they're going to be bringing some more countries online. So some more locations should be announced at that time. So with Microsoft provided calling plans, one of the benefits is you can rapidly provision your new users and acquire your new numbers from Microsoft, usually within minutes, in a direct routing scenario, or in a traditional online PSTN offering. The time to provision new numbers from a carrier can vary. In the United States, it could be within the same day. But I've seen some instances overseas where clients are using direct routing. If you need to get new numbers there, and it could be up to 10 days to 2 weeks to get new numbers available in your hosted solution there. So obviously there's a great benefit there going with Microsoft if and when you can. You can also port your current telephone numbers from your existing PSTN provider to Microsoft. So this allows you to transition those numbers over. You can do it in a phased approach, and your users don't have to worry about getting new numbers. They'll keep the same number they always had. It'll continue to work in the Microsoft world, but their phones will ring into the Teams client rather than onto their desktop phones. Emergency services, so this is obviously a requirement in every country. Microsoft has been providing emergency services through 911 in the US for quite a while now in both the Skype for Business Online world as well as in Teams. And then in other countries as well, they utilize the standard service numbers in those locations to achieve that emergency calling functionality. In the US, it is tightly integrated with the National 911 database. So all locations, as you start building out your offices in Teams, need to be validated against that 911 database to make sure that the emergency services know where your users are based on your location information as you have it in your tenant. Another option to talk about there as well, quickly on the 911 services, Microsoft also has what they're calling enhanced 911. Basically what that does is allows you to build out some more custom policies around your emergency locations and emergency services use. So had a couple clients configure it where maybe they have a security team on-prem or a receptionist desk that needs to be notified if someone dials 911 in the US. So you can create policies now where when someone does dial 911 or whatever the emergency service number is in their region, you can have it notify security teams in-house or receptionists. So when those emergency teams show up at the office desk, they know what's going on, they know where to send them to. Also some advanced dynamic features that used to only be available in Skype on-prem. You can configure your individual network locations in your Teams tenant as well. So the Teams client will detect the IP address of the user's laptop or device at their tablet, whatever it is that they're connected through, and send that location information through when they dial 911. So that the database on the back end in your tenant will to look up that that IP address and match it up to the locations that you have configured in your tenant, so it can provide dynamic real-time information as to where that user is actually located when they dial emergency services. And then we have this link here. I believe we're going to put it into the chat as well, this aka.ms/callingplans link. You can reference that going forward. Like I said, Microsoft is going to be bringing new locations online after the first of the year for their calling plans. So it's always good to keep referencing that going forward to see what locations they've added or what's on their roadmap. So the next option that Joe mentioned for bringing PSTN connectivity into Teams is the Teams direct routing method. This used to be in the Skype world. It was achieved through the Cloud Connector edition. And what you're basically doing is tying your on-prem PSTN connection, whether it's a SIP trunk, old PRI lines, or a system like a Cisco or Avaya, and you're linking that to your Teams space. So it gives you a couple different options. Basically, that PSTN connectivity is provided by your third-party carrier rather than using Microsoft for the service. You typically do this in locations where Microsoft doesn't offer the calling plans yet. We still have a lot of clients with locations, like I said, in Asia, South America, for example, where Microsoft doesn't offer these plans. So you have to utilize the direct routing method in those locations. You have to utilize a Teams certified SBC, and Microsoft has that information published in their certified devices list on TechNet, so you can reference that. But there are offerings from Audio Codes, Sonos or Ribbon, as their new name is, as well as some Cisco devices. Nokia, I think, was announced. Oracle has some. So the kind of interesting thing there is that Cisco is actually partnering with Microsoft in the Teams space now, even though they are kind of competitors in the voice world. Cisco has realized the benefit of partnering with Microsoft in this offering too. So if you are a Cisco shop, you can utilize some Cisco hardware to fill that session border controller role on-prem. There's also hosted solutions. So if you have locations overseas or some of these other countries where Microsoft doesn't offer the plans, and maybe you have a small shop, small office, and it doesn't really make sense to put actual physical hardware in on-prem, you can utilize hosted offerings from, again, Audio Codes or Ribbon. They work with international carriers, the AT&Ts, Verizons of the world, and they'll have a hosted SBC appliance in one of those major data centers. Sometimes it's in an Azure or an AWS virtual offering, but basically, it gives you the option in those regions to have your calls come in from a in-country carrier and still route those calls up to Microsoft Teams clients without having to have an actual physical hardware footprint in that space. You're also obviously going that route. You're utilizing redundancy and resiliency that's built into these large data centers or cloud offerings. So that's an added bonus going that approach as well. You can keep your third-party PBX systems, like we said. So if you have a Cisco or an Avaya PBX on-prem, maybe you have a call manager or Avaya session manager, you can integrate them with Teams calling as well by using the session border controllers with direct routing. That gives you the capability to do more of a phased approach deployment. So if you want to integrate and have your Teams callers be able to dial an extension to reach people who are still on the Cisco side, or vice versa, have Cisco callers, dial an extension for the Teams users, you can do that too. And again, it gives you that phased approach capability to slowly migrate users across and still have everything work together. The other cases we've seen the SBCs deployed or direct routing deployed is if you maybe have some legacy equipment, some analog systems, such as fax machines or security systems, the type where you buzz a door to get in. Those are traditionally analog type systems. So you can tie all that into the session border controller as well to make the whole system tie together and function as one. And then in the direct routing scenario, just one thing to note is that your audio conferencing numbers, with the exception of the DoD cloud, your audio conferencing numbers are still provided by Microsoft natively in Teams. So if you have your own conferencing dial-in numbers, you can port those over to Microsoft if you want to, but in the direct routing scenario, you can't route that traffic across to go from your on-prem into a Microsoft audio conferencing. So Pstn connectivity comparison, this is just a summary of a lot of what we've talked about already. So I'm not going to go through a ton of it in detail, but the takeaway is ideally you want to try and use the Microsoft calling plans where Microsoft offers this service, unless you have a specific business requirement that dictates otherwise, such as those analog devices, or maybe you have existing contracts with Cisco or Avayas or ShoreTel, whoever your current system is, that hasn't expired yet and you're still paying for that and locked into that agreement. In those cases, then obviously direct routing might make more sense for you. Okay, so now we're going to go into a little bit more detail on the Teams voice extensibility. I'm going to kick it back over to Joe here to start that conversation. Or actually, no, sorry, I'm not kicking back over to Joe. Apologies. I'm going to cover part of this. So got confused on that one. So Microsoft recently announced the Advanced Communication License. This is kind of a huge thing we've been waiting for in the industry. We have a lot of clients who are coming from the on-prem solutions where maybe they had a call center integrated or contact centers or some other third-party gear that was tying into their phone system, and going to Microsoft. So, okay, you have auto attendance and call queues, but they didn't have that extra functionality that the call center solutions provide. So one of the things Microsoft is doing to address that is allowing third-party vendors, such as Genesys or some of these other clients that are shown here, the Five9s, the Anywhere 365, Landis, allowing them to create solutions that can tie into Teams and provide those extra features that you need. So it was kind of unknown how they were going to actually handle this for a while, and at Inspire, which is the partner event a couple months ago, they announced this new advanced communication license. So it's going to provide those features to allow those third-party tie-in. There is currently a trial license available. I believe it's a 90-day license. It might be 60, but it's available in most tenants now. So if you're already a Teams voice user, you can talk to Microsoft or your licensing provider and get those trial licenses in there to start playing around with it. Some of the additional features it's going to provide you. So when you get this license, live events are going to be up to 20,000 participants. So that's a pretty big jump. Your interactive meetings, so your normal Teams meetings, so instead of the 250 participant limit, they're bumping that up to 1,000 participants, and you'll have the capability to enable up to 20,000 participants in a view-only meeting experience for those additional. Another big piece of this is the branded meeting lobby. So when people dial into your meetings, call into your meetings, they currently are just put into a Microsoft branded meeting lobby, and it just says, please wait for someone to admit you. You'll be able to do some custom branding in that lobby as well, so you can put your own logos in place as needed. Compliance recording and the contact centers, as I discussed, those are third-party offerings. So you'll have to work with one of the third-party vendors to achieve that, but the license does also give you that ability. It enables the graph APIs on the voice side so that you can tie in with those compliance recording solutions. The contact centers, attendant consoles that are currently available from these third-party vendors as well would utilize that graph API to tie into the system and be able to bring online those additional features. And then they've also said that there will be additional customizations. They'll be making enhancements to the tool and the communications license as the SKU progresses throughout the calendar year. And now I'll turn it back over to Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. No worries. Yeah, so I mean, just kind of tying into what Chris was talking about with this advanced communications license, right? The attendant consoles are separate from the call centers in that where you need, like, you have operators, maybe reception type scenarios, basically any time that there's multi-call handling needed, right, with the full telephony features, right? These attendant consoles are kind of a tie-in and add those features and that capability into the Microsoft Teams interface natively, right? So one thing that's currently available too, right, is in the case where, and this was kind of right before these APIs are coming out, you could still, take an attendance console that was on Skype for Business Online, connect it to a Skype for Business Online, and utilize it still with Teams. So that was kind of an interim option, if you will. However, obviously, some of these have the option to utilize the console and Teams while still operating from, the Skype for Business backend, like I was saying. That is in limited preview still. The broader customer availability is coming soon. I think we saw in maybe the next month or two with the release of those APIs. So I believe there's still a little bit of work to do there. All right, so from here we're going to jump into kind of talking about the Teams endpoint offerings, right? What to look at, what to how to strategize, and kind of what are some of the additional things from Microsoft that are now available. So Teams obviously supports kind of a broad ecosystem of devices, and that's that's growing every day as more companies are releasing more of these devices, right? The thing with the Teams that there's kind of a difference from the Skype for Business, right, is that all of the Teams devices are compliant with the Teams meeting and calling experience, right? Microsoft has created the Teams application in such a way that it offers that consistent user experience across all of the devices, no matter what device you're running. They actually are requiring that certification and them to run that specific application. So when planning for your device strategies, for instance, right, it's helpful to kind of provide those end users with a consistent experience, right? Obviously this reduces confusion. It can provide more efficient operation for you, and with that being said, that can in turn drive kind of your adoption, right? If you're training them well and providing those consistent communications, right, that's going to help your adoption in any case. So in addition, right, Microsoft's still supporting the cloud video interop solutions that allows you to support your existing meeting room investments, right? If some of the older the MTR, well, not the MTR, but the systems like that, where the telepresence systems, etc. With those third-party services, and those are all available through like Poly, Pexip, BlueJeans currently. Something that's new is the MTRs, or the Microsoft Teams rooms, right, can now natively host Webex meetings, right? And Zoom meetings or the Zoom meeting interoperability is coming soon as well. I saw that on the roadmap as well. So devices are continuously being updated, right, with these new features, like we were talking about with that Teams native application running on them, right? So something else that was recently became available, if you're looking at room systems, is the Microsoft Managed Teams Room Service. And this is where Microsoft can manage for you, right, the firmware and software life cycles of those devices, provide you issue support, troubleshooting, case resolution with those devices. The one exception to this is that the hands-on service that would have to come from like a third party or another provider, managed service provider, if you will. Also, so another upcoming offer released or recently announced at the Microsoft Ignite 2020 is the device as a service option, right? So, basically what this is a monthly financing option direct with Microsoft to purchase various endpoints in the manner that you want. They're also offering, this is a full device portfolio, right? Everything from headsets to the Teams room systems. Now, that's not managing the room system. This is just getting the devices. So that's where it kind of differs from the Microsoft managed Teams rooms. And any of the accessories obviously are offered via some flexible payment plans from multiple channel partners globally. So this can help consolidate and bring all of your licensing and devices kind of under that single manageable contact point again, right? To talk about that. From any device, right, regardless of kind of how you purchase it, sorry, that jumped forward on me. You should expect a fluid experience using the supported Teams meeting client platforms desk, and that just does not want to stay. Sorry, the consistent experience right is achieved by Microsoft's continuing dedication to enforcing the familiar use of the Teams application interface across a range of platforms, and that just does not want to stay there. So, Chris, well, I'm going to hand that back to you for those additional features, and we haven't mentioned, that were just announced at Microsoft Ignite 2020.
Okay.
There you go.
So, yeah, we've obviously covered some of these announcements already in the earlier slides around the new regions that have been announced in the calling plans world and for direct routing deployments. But obviously, since Microsoft is always working on upgrades and new features to Teams, there's a few additional announcements that we want to bring attention to as well. So the first one is the ability to transfer calls between Teams devices, such as your PC, tablet, or mobile phone. So if you're on a call in, let's say, your office on your PC and maybe you're running late, you can now send that call to your mobile phone and continue the call as you head out the door with no interruptions to the call itself. So
yeah, that's going to be nice.
Yes. So yeah, nice features there. The other thing I think is also with this, when you're the ability to split your audio content from the presentation content in the call. So, if you're on a call or a meeting, PC or mobile phone, and the content that's being shared would be useful for other people on your team to see, and you want to have them see it in real time, you can send that content to a secondary device, such as a meeting room device or a tablet that can pass around through a huddle space environment, whatever it is. So everyone can kind of see that content as it's being shared in real time and contribute. So it brings that whole teamwork aspect back into the calling space, which is a nice feature to see. The next big thing, I think this is one of the bigger ones, and the slide is missing part of its. There it is. Okay. So collaborative calling, this in my experience has been something that many of my clients have been asking for. So Microsoft has had auto attendance and call queues for quite a while in Skype for Business and Teams. But in Teams, they've been building on the call queue space to bring more useful features over traditional hunt groups, which is originally what call queues were made to replace. So what collaborative calling does is it's building out that call queue feature set even further by linking your queues to your Teams channel. So, the new share channel provides an area now where the agents in the queue can work together to share knowledge. So maybe triage an incident that they're all responding to, or even just collaborate or support calls in general. There'll be a new shared voicemail view for the queue. Previously, agents all had to have access to a shared Exchange mailbox and look at those messages in their Outlook client or an Office 365 group that messages were sent to. So now they'll be able to see this all in one place. In addition to their own voicemail messages, they'll see the messages left for the queue agents, and I'll be able to work on them and respond to them effectively in that one interface. There's a shared call queue log, so where the agents and managers can view the call history for the queue, as well as an area where agents in the queue can set their availability status, and then other agents and managers can see it in real time.
Yeah,
so
this is almost like jumping into the call center.
Yeah, exactly.
Area, isn't it? Yeah.
Yep. So that's just Microsoft is basically adding these additions. They're bridging that gap between the traditional basic hunt groups functionality and full-blown call center solutions. So they're still leaving that door open for the third parties to have their solutions that tie in to give you that full call center functionality, but they're giving you some of that additional pieces in there, which is nice, and may satisfy the need of many clients without having to actually go and spend the licensing for those third-party offerings.
Yep, that'd be big.
So captions and recording. This is another kind of smaller piece, but it might be bigger in some organizations. So Microsoft has had caption recording and transcription in Teams for a while, but pretty much only in the meeting space. So at Ignite, they announced that they're bringing these features to the calling space as well. Captions and transcriptions will be in real time or very close to it, just as it is in the Teams meetings right now. Much like in the meetings, these will be available in English initially, and then they'll be rolling out additional languages real soon. And the transcriptions are available after the call is complete, so they can be reviewed by the call participants. So if you need to, instead of taking notes on a call, you can just go back and look at your transcriptions and see what was said and follow up based on that information. And we basically have 1 minute left, so I'm going to go over this next part really quickly. Survivable branch appliance. So this previously was available only in Skype on-prem worlds. What this does is it allows you to work in almost a Teams offline mode. So maybe in some locations where you don't really have reliable WAN or internet connectivity, but your PSTN provider is fairly reliable. What this device will allow you to do, it's actually an appliance component that connects into the SBC in a direct routing scenario, and allows your users in that affected location to work basically offline. So if the team connection to Microsoft goes down, they can still utilize their phones. They can make and receive PSTN-based calls. And then in the future, Microsoft is also going to make it so they can do peer-to-peer calling as well in this offline type mode.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've gone through a lot of information in this session. So now what do you do with it? What's your next step in planning for your deployment, or what's on your roadmap, and how else can Catapult help you? So we have 2 Teams workshops offerings available. These are workshops developed by Microsoft, and they're being delivered by Catapult as a Microsoft Gold partner. We offer Teams calling and Teams meetings workshops. In the Teams calling workshop, you'll get findings and recommended next steps to begin implementing your Teams voice project. And in the meetings workshop, you'll end up with a customized report with actionable recommendations on how to create a modern meetings environment. So you can use the URL provided to get additional information on these workshop offerings. We can also engage with you on your planning and deployment projects as well. There's a QR code at the end of this session and a couple slides here that will bring you to a survey. So if you need additional help, just provide us your email address in there, and a representative from Catapult will reach out to you and see how we can provide additional assistance in your planning and potential migration projects going forward. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Thank you all for your time. Again, if you have additional questions, Joe and I will be participating in the Ask the Experts session following this session in about 10 minutes or so. The link to that session will be in the chat window here as well. And again, please take the survey if you have a chance. It takes about a minute to complete. You can access it on your phone with the QR code, or take it on the computer with the link in the chat box. And the more surveys you take throughout the day, the better chance you have at winning the $250 raffle that Catapult and Microsoft are providing as well. So
all right.
Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for your time. We're going to leave this up for just a few minutes for you.